What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back and welcome into the channel. Figured it's been a while since I've done a video actually talking about the Mariners directly. So I thought I'd do a little video talking about the pretty much the two most significant injuries. We'll talk about George Kirby and then Mitch Garver today. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of updates, but I will dive into a little bit on the Garver situation. So figured it was time as we now are 17 days away from opening day. Cannot wait. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I do post-game recaps for every Mariners game. I think you'll enjoy them. And whether you're new here or not, go ahead and hit that like button. It does help out the channel tremendously. Like saying, if you don't agree with everything I say, it just helps get the video out to more people. So I truly do appreciate everybody that hits that like button. It helps out tremendously. Apologize for the poor lighting. My ring light is missing the plug-in. My kids did something with it, I guess. So if they're watching this, please bring it back to me. I have no idea where it is, but so I apologize for a bit of the poor dim lighting. But I'll make sure that's ready for the regular season. So the first injury news that hit for the Mariners happened, I'd say late last week. Was it Friday? I think it was Friday that George Kirby is going to open the season on the injured list. He's being shut down due to shoulder inflammation. Justin Hollander, Mariners general manager, spoke about it, said there's no structural damage. Kirby said he could keep pitching through it, but the team understandably is taking a cautious approach with an important member of the pitching staff. Justin Hollander said they've already done the MRI. So like I said, that's not just a speculation by the Mariners. There's no structural damage. But with that said, anytime you hear shoulder injury, elbow with pitchers, you get nervous, right? Like, and I know it was certainly a different injury situation, so we shouldn't necessarily compare it, but I'm going to. Matt Brash last year with his elbow, remember, it was just going to be pushed back a little bit, and he didn't need surgery. And then, come middle April, he's going to be out for the year with getting Tommy John surgery. Now, I'm not saying that Kirby is going to need some, major surgery on the shoulder, but anytime, like I said, shoulder, elbow with pitchers, you get a little bit nervous about it because it's just the two most common ones that seem to have the most lingering effect. In fact, I'd say shoulder actually has more of a long-term lingering effect than elbow because you have that Tommy John surgery to fix it. Shoulder's a little trickier. Not a doctor by any means, so maybe that's not 100% correct on it, but it's concerning, right? Like, bottom line here is George Kirby's shoulder injury is concerning, even if the Mariners are fairly optimistic that it's not going to be anything long term. And listen, we know how these injuries go, right? At times, I'm not trying to be pessimistic about it, but okay, we think the guy's going to miss a month. Well, then you get to late April and it's like, well, he threw a little bit, but wasn't great. So we're going to push it back to a week or two. So now you're into early May. Okay, so mid-May, we're going to start a rehab assignment. Well, the rehab assignment, the stamina isn't building up like we hope, so we're going to shut him down for another couple weeks. And all of a sudden, it's, middle of June before a guy's making his debut. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I think a lot of times the initial reports never seem to, it's always a little bit more rose-colored glasses with like, hey, we don't think there's anything wrong. This is just precautionary, and we think he can be back in late April. And hopefully that's the case, right? Hopefully that is 100% all this is, and we see George Kirby on the mound in late April. I'm not speculating it's going to be longer, but we just know how these things go at times. So I think it's always best to just proceed with caution. I'm not saying assume George Kirby's going to miss the season or anything like that, but I wouldn't be completely shocked if we don't see him until May or something like that. But hopefully not. Hopefully he's back in April. That leaves an open spot in the rotation. I was on with Jake from Raise the Trident and Colby from Locked On Mariners with Chad on Touching Bases podcast. I don't know if he uploaded it yet. I know he was saying something wrong with the file, but we talked about this a little bit. Now, Colby made some really good points in that podcast, talking about how the Mariners could just skip. If it is just going to be like April, they could just skip that fifth start and kind of run everybody on normal rest because they do have some more off days in April that they can kind of work around a little bit. So that's something that the Mariners could just do, is kind of run a 4-man rotation. Maybe they have to have, a fifth starter once or twice. That's definitely something they could do. But more than likely, I think we know how the Mariners are with pitchers. We know how they like to be careful and cautious. My guess is they're not going to want to skip an extra day's rest for these guys in April. In September, you'd probably just go, hey, listen, all hands on deck. Now, again, every game counts for one. I'm not saying that April doesn't matter, but I think out of the gate, they're going to be a little bit more cautious with it and probably just have a fifth starter in there. Emerson Hancock is obviously the front runner for this position. I'd be hard pressed to see it being anybody but Emerson Hancock. I know Logan Evans, but if it's just going to be a short amount of time, I don't see the benefit in it being Logan Evans. Now, if it's going to be something that lingers and Kirby is out for, God forbid, but half the season, then yeah, I think you want to look at Logan Evans because I think he just profiles to be a little bit better than Emerson Hancock down the road. But if we're just looking at April, Hancock's got the experience. This is kind of what he's done in the past. He did it last year when Brian Wu missed time in April, and then again in September when Luis Castillo missed some time. So you can plug Emerson Hancock in there. Is he great? No, but he can get you results, right? And listen, I'm not saying that Hancock can't develop into a solid starting pitcher, but last year he was pretty meh, for the most part, kind of your typical fifth, sixth star. But this is a massive pitcher's park in T-Mobile. He makes 3 or 4 starts here at home or something like that. And there's no reason he can't have a few 5, 6 inning, 1-2 earned run start. Maybe they're not pretty. Maybe he's walking 3, striking out 1. Maybe it's a lot of deep fly balls, stuff like that. Hancock tends to keep the ball on the ground, but you guys know what I'm saying. I don't so much really care how it gets done, as long as he can kind of do what he did last April for the Mariners. And I know the numbers weren't very pretty. That was because he had that one really bad start in Milwaukee. But other than that, Emerson Hancock held down the fort until Brian Wu was ready to go. That's most likely what they're going to do. They could look outside the organization. You do have some free agents. Kyle Gibson still available, though I imagine the Yankees might come calling with Garrett Cole going into Tommy John surgery. Spencer Turnbull's still out there. Who else is still out there? Was another name that I saw, and I don't have the list up on me, but there are a couple veteran options out there that the Mariners could sign. I don't see them doing that. One, I think they're going to save that money for the trade deadline. I'm not saying I agree with that decision necessarily, but I think they're going to sit there and kind of go, listen, Emerson Hancock can give us exactly what these guys that are still out there can give us. We're just going to roll with that. Unless, again, Kirby's injury is more significant, then you might want to start getting a little bit more, looking at a free agent or looking at how quickly a Logan Evans can come up and maybe contribute to this rotation. So listen, if it's just April, I'll be honest, I don't really care what they do for the month. It's probably 4 starts at max. I think Emerson Hancock can be fine for 4 starts and keep it afloat, and I'm not worried about it. If Kirby's back in early May, then great, whatever. Even if it's a Jonathan Diaz, I don't really care. They're pitching it in T-Mobile. I mean, obviously they have to make some road starts, but I think they can get the job done for a month and be fine. If it's longer than that, I'll start to have some concern. So again, should we hit a panic button? No, until there's more to panic about, we shouldn't. But I always just kind of prepare for the worst. I'm, again, not a doctor, not saying it is going to be worse, but we know how these things work out. And usually it seems like guys miss a little bit more time. And it's not just a Mariners thing. It's just sports in general. Oh, guys can be back next week in football. And, it turns out to be 2-3 weeks sometimes. So could see something similar here. Unfortunately today, Mitch Garver was hit on the hand with a pitch and had to come out of the game. Ryan Divish reported the Mariners are still waiting on that MRI. The fact that they're still waiting on it makes me a little concerned. Garver is having a very nice spring training so far this year for the Mariners. We shouldn't put a ton of stock into spring training stats, as I've said. Plenty of guys had big spring trainings last year, didn't do anything in the regular season. I kind of believe in a Mitch Garver bounce back. It's not so much just that, every odd year Garver's been good. It's just that I like what I saw last year didn't look like a player that was kind of washed up. He still hit lefties very well. There were some signs in September that I thought he was turning it around. And he had moments throughout the year. If he can just kind of lift it up a little bit against right-handed pitching, I think he's a pretty good bounce back candidate. But regardless of what you think of Mitch Garver, whether you think he stinks or will bounce back or you think he's great, it still leaves a hole in the roster if Garver's going to miss time. And again, I'm very concerned. I am concerned about that one. The fact that we don't have the MRI, the fact that they're still kind of waiting on it. Could be nothing. Again, not a doctor. But my guess is Mitch Garver may miss some time with a hand injury, broken hand. I don't know. But my guess would be that he probably does miss a little bit of time here. And that creates a roster crunch because Garver is almost playing 2 roles at once. He's a option for sure as a DH against left-handed pitching and against right-handed pitching, but primarily you would think at least to start the year against lefties. And he's your number 2 catcher, so you almost create 2 roster holes by losing Mitch Garver. Again, take what you think about Garver out of the equation. It does leave a roster hole, a hole in the roster, and it does make you worse in at least in the short term. Now, DH wise, they can rotate that. Mitch Haniger can have some DH at-bats. Not that I love Mitch Haniger getting more at-bats, but it's an option. Solano would probably be my guess, would primarily DH. Raley will probably get some run in there at DH as well. Polanco will probably need some days where he's not in the field. He can DH. So I imagine they can work around that, but it does, create a little bit more of a roster crunch. Again, now part of that too is some of the inactivity we've seen this offseason as well. But it also means you're going to have to carry, another catcher on the roster. You can't just have one. Obviously, Harry Ford is a name that's going to come up a lot, but Ford's not on the 40-man roster right now. Blake Hunt is, and I just don't see them, unless Garver's out for the year or something, which I doubt. I don't see them rolling with Harry Ford just to be Cal Raleigh's backup catcher here for a month or two or whatever Garver misses if he does miss time. Hunt is probably the better, just the easier option, I guess would be, for lack of a better term. He's on the 40-man. I think he is. You know what? Now, let me double check that actually. Let me pull that up here. You know what? I shouldn't. I'm kind of speculating on that. I'm pretty sure I'm correct. Yeah, Garrett Cole to undergo season-ending Tommy John. Just saw that. Teams, I can find the Mariners easily in MLB.com when I'm not pressured here, but when I'm on the clock, roster, 40-man roster. Yeah, Blake Hunt's on the 40-man and Harry Ford is not. So it just, from that logical standpoint there, it makes more sense to carry Blake Hunt. And if Garver's just going, and again, I'm speculating, I don't know, but if Garver is going to miss just a month of time, I think Hunt is the better option. Plug him in there. He can start, every final game of a series, occasionally against lefties or something like that, because he is a righty, right? Yeah, Blake Hunt's a right-handed hitter. So I think that's your more likely scenario. I know people get into the Harry Ford speculation if Garver's out, but my guess is Blake Hunt is catcher and Solano's your primary DH. So that's what I think they would do if Mitch Garver is to miss time, which I am a little bit worried about. Listen, I think overall on the injury front, the Mariners have been pretty fortunate. It doesn't seem like anything drastic. Again, look at the Yankees with Garrett Cole and Giancarlo Stanton, both suffering significant injuries. So I think if Kirby's just going to miss April and Garver's, let's say 4 to 6 weeks, I think you'll be okay with that. It still stings. It's, George Kirby's a fantastic pitcher, potential Cy Young candidate that is going to miss some time. That stings. But if it's just that short time, Emerson Hancock can fill in. If Mitch Garver's just going to miss a month or so, Blake Hunt can fill in, Solano and Haniger can DH, and you should be able to float by a little bit for the time being. So nothing that I'm super concerned about. Again, until we know more information, we shouldn't freak out about it. Maybe Garver's MRI does come back fine. Maybe it's just it's late and they haven't decided to report it yet because everyone's gone home for the night. It could be nothing. But I don't know. Just some of what I'm reading makes me think it is probably a fairly significant hand injury. And then, like I said, with Kirby, I'd feel a little bit better. Now, it feels like an ankle injury with Kirby. I'd say, yeah, a few weeks, he'll be fine. Shoulder just makes me nervous. So it is definitely fair to be, certainly more concerned about Kirby than Garver. If Garver, it's a broken hand, the bone will heal. The shoulder fatigue, that can kind of linger and stuff. So again, I'm rambling about it, but that's kind of my take on the injury front so far for the Mariners. And again, they've kind of put themselves in a spot where not having a big offseason, I'm not saying I expected them to add a ton of starting pitching or anything, but offensively, right, you put themselves in a spot where losing Mitch Garver is big for this team. So, a little unfortunate with some of the maybe lack of moves this offseason. So that's all I've got. Have a great night, everybody. Like, comment, leave your thoughts down below on these injuries or anything else Seattle Mariners related. I will see you guys all later. And as always, go Mariners. Peace.